if I could add, Carey, the other thing that I think vets have is the ability to talk to each other in a way that has credibility. So, kind of a funny story, I guess, but I get on a plane, headed out to the region. I happen to be sitting next to a pretty senior politician who I know, who is a vet, right? And he knows that I'm an analyst on ABC, so he starts saying, he goes right into, this effort, the Maritime Corps, not knowing that I had anything to do with it, talking about feeding terrorists, and this is only going to be terrorists and all that stuff. And he goes through this long diatribe, and then he looks at me and he says, well, what are you and Eric doing? Eric is also Eric Ulrich, retired SEAL. He's our chief operating officer for Fogbow. And I said, well, I guess we're feeding terrorists right now. So it was a long, awkward pause, and he was like, what? And then I started explaining it, right, in a way that cut through the, political bylines and stuff. And to his credit, he was like, well, damn, I didn't know there was that many vets doing this. So then he was listening a little more, not because of me or Eric, but just, he was like, well, you guys aren't who I thought would be behind this. And then I think by the end of it, and I can't speak for this guy, but I think we won over somebody, put it that way. At least somebody who was hard no, this is not what we should be doing, to, well, maybe we should be doing it. Well, I do think I've come off my belief that we're actually, feeding terrorists to Worth's point. We're just trying to feed babies. Yeah. I mean, it's the core. I think it's the core mission in any human's life is to feed babies, right? And I think, having sat on a plane for him for 6 hours, we got there. But I don't know if he would have, we would have had that kind of discussion, quite frankly, if we both didn't come from that community, to be frank.
That really points to something I call the Barracks Dichotomy, and I think it gets lost even amongst vets when they transition out. I use myself as an example. If I describe myself professionally as a retired Marine Raider who now writes about hunting and fishing for a living, and who owns more guns than I actually know, I have to pile them in my gun case now because people give them to me. That creates an image in some people's mind that fits perfectly with what I ought to be as a Marine. If I then turn to you and say, I've been married for 21 years to a woman who was the lead attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union of North Carolina, and who is a pretty liberal person, and my kid's pretty liberal, and I'm a writer who lives in the suburbs in a nice neighborhood. That creates an entirely different impression in your mind of exactly who I must be. But the truth of the matter is I'm all of those things, and it's the Barracks Dichotomy of the kid who came from South Central Los Angeles living with the goat roper from Oklahoma, and they go out on Friday night and they go to the same bar because the beer is cheap there, and maybe they argue. I mean, I've watched, amazing arguments while sitting somewhere at a range or something by guys who will also run across a street under fire to grab the guy that they were accusing of being, an enemy of America 20 minutes before. But that's a recreational argument in that environment, not a serious argument. We've gotten to a point in the country where I think we're starting to cement and act like that's a serious argument about identity, when again, I'm all of those identities. And all of those identities can agree that feeding babies is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. My personal, the best kind of cultural and political education I got was my 4 years in the military, being exposed to people from four corners of this country and all the way in between. And I witnessed the exact same thing. And I participated in those, right? Like, I had strong feelings and beliefs, still do. They're more loosely held now because of these experiences, but they're still strong. But I had strong beliefs, and then we would argue, and then I would change my mind or change somebody else's mind or just adjust it slightly and kind of have these conversations, this pushback, because we did have that shared foundation, in the Air Force of basic military training and then tech school. And then we kind of had all these shared hardship experiences where we knew that, like, oh, that's a really strong foundation for a life and for a friendship and for a relationship and for a colleagueship, to continue the word making uptrend on this episode. And I got out and I have those conversations. They don't go the same way. My wife would be like, why are you can't talk like that. What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just having a free-flowing conversation about some shit that matters. She's like, first of all, it doesn't really matter that much. And second of all, you're not in the military anymore, dude. And I'm like, oh shit, you're right. It's a different environment and a different relationship with people. And I love that Barracks Dichotomy. I love that.